Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX. And today we are taking something of a different journey on the show. Often we speak to politicians, but today I'm speaking to a literary luminary.
Lol.
Phumlani Pikoli has published Born Freeloaders, this excellent piece of work here. And I'm going to be chatting to Phumlani about this new work and just life as a prominent young black South African author. Thanks for coming on the show, bro.
Thanks for having me, man.
You know, it's kind of weird to read a book as a young black South African where you actually see yourself on the pages. I'm not used to that. Like, I'm used to having to contort myself to understand the perspective. And then with this, the perspective was so viscerally within my experience. I was like, whoa, I don't know how to feel.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was low-key the intention. There've been a couple of people who've written sort of from the young South African sort of experience, but it's also kind of dated, you know. So the last there's been very few sort of novels or fictions that I've been able to grab. There's a couple in terms of contemporaries who've also written, but not from Pretoria, bro.
Yeah.
I had to just put one out for Pretoria.
Pretoria stand up.
Yeah, exactly. Cap City, Rap City.
So, man, let's start with this title. Let's start there. What was your thinking behind this? It's called Born Freeloaders.
Yeah.
You occupy this. We're gonna get into what happens, but I think this title needs to be focused on for a while.
I mean, you know, it's in the title. Yeah, man, it's just an exploration around sort of middle class privilege and proximities towards sort of political power and the ideas of overlapping sort of realities and exploring language insecurity and cultural identity, as well as racial identity, I guess, and different sort of overlapping themes.
Yeah.
And so Born Freeloaders for me was just kind of yo, what do our parents look at us like? You know what I mean? You know, a lot, quite a few first generation middle class black South Africans have a parent struggle story, you know. So I was just kind of alright, cool, let's play with that. Let's play with the idea of what I think or we think our parents look at us kind of. But then also indulging the privilege a little bit, because privilege means nothing if you don't use it, right?
Sure.
So playing with that idea.
Yeah, it was cool because I feel like the term was almost imposed on this generation by the generation, you know, above us.
Yeah.
And wanting us to be what the term meant, and now you've taken it and just subverted it. If you guys want to see the generation, I'll give it to you, but we're gonna have to add that little loaders at the end.
Exactly.
And I think so many of the themes that come out of this work rest on this moment that we're in our generation, where we have become so different from our parents' generation, and we have to then double back on ourselves and try to explain that to them, explain that to ourselves. And there's this whole dialogue through the book, not saying there is a generational divide at the moment, but conversations between, you know, people from the, shall we call it the struggle uncle generation, right?
Okay, cool.
They're always
the struggle uncle generation. I'm down with that.
Because we've got a struggle uncle up in here. The struggle uncle generation is we need an intergenerational dialogue.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And instead of doing that, obviously you've just shown what that looks like in real life.
Yeah.
And it's very different from people sitting around having an imbizo.
Yeah, straight up.
Take us through some of what was going through your mind, looking at what it's like to be in this generation and just the sheer difference between what our parents went through and what we went through, and how we are probably the only generation that's ever going to have to deal with that dissonance.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, it was kind of like a snapshot, trying to sort of play with like the idea of time as well, because the book takes place over like 3 days or something. And so for me, that the whole idea for all of that was to have these sort of like memory play as an integral part to each of these characters' understandings and like constructions of the world, right?
Sure.
And so with all of that, like all these fractured like ideas and all these memories sort of allowing them to sort of create these worlds that they keep occupying, I wanted to have the influence of like our parents' generation sort of kind of like a little nagging like in the back of your head, but also at the same time explore the idea of having like missing parents, like absent parents, and because obviously because for them one of the children they've got to take care of is the country, and so those political proximities play up like that sort of idea. And so what I really liked to play on was, you know, being like your parents being disappointed in you choosing like having like the choice to decide on things that they fought for, but not being happy with the choice that you made, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so yeah.
And, like, the way you put that across is literally perfect, because it's like that conversation that every one of us has had, which is like, I really like music and I want to try this, and then our parents are like, you want to do what? Like, and like that dilemma.
Yeah.
I've never seen that put into literature before. It was one of those moments where I'm like, wow, like, wow, so this is not just me. You know? And like, I think there's so many people, young Black South Africans in this generation, who want to exploit the freedom they've been given and go in directions that their parents haven't even understood that they can, and then bumping up against like struggle uncle mentality.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Is that, you know, in terms of the idea of sort of struggle, liberation, whatever, I think there's definitely like blinkers and like really limited definitions around those ideas. So when they're fighting, they're like, oh, okay, cool, I'm fighting for my kid to be a doctor. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but the reality is that like you're fighting for like your kid's liberty to choose like the life that they want to live, you know, and that's the big mess. And like you're saying, exploiting liberty, exploiting that freedom is something that should come sort of naturally. But as black people, you're always tasked with like, okay, cool, you've got this, what are you gonna do with it? What, like, you know, you've got like this communal burden and responsibility, and like, you know, and then, you know, with privilege comes survivor's guilt. So so that's what, like, I thought that was really cool to play with.
And there are a number of places where you like draw that out in an adept way. Towards the end, you know, the survivor's guilt that comes with privilege is overwhelming, and we all just want to say, fuck it, and live our lives free of the suffocating noose of communal burden and expectation. And I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, that was I didn't even realize that I was almost quoting verbatim. That means I've got a really limited vocabulary.
No, it means you speak as well as you write.
I know a couple of private school teachers would be happy with that.
Hey man, we're gonna get into private school just now. Don't worry.
Yeah, man. But I mean, it's sort of the, you know, the more we go along, the more, I mean, it's cool. You grow up reading, and like you get introduced to like political theory and like political ideas and like whatever, and then you go to varsity. And so I think for me, what I was trying to do with that is trying to articulate in the best way you know how, your experience, because you know, like, cool, you can you can learn how to say stuff, but like until you can communicate it to yourself, it's sort of it's sort of moot and dead, you know. And so with that, I was just kind of like, fuck, I had to be honest with myself about like this feeling and what is it? What's the anxiety that's constantly behind almost every interaction that you have, you know?
You know, the thing for me about it is also just like, because this experience is so underrepresented in literature, it's like you either have to go like the radical black route, or like write a novel like you read in high school. It's very difficult to be authentic to the experience, you know, because you're worried about people saying, oh, but there's the privilege thing and there's all this different stuff. And we're all like conning each other because we all experience that world of privilege. And we all have that burden and we're all trying to mediate it, but we're not like expressing that we're trying to mediate it. You know? We just wear the appropriate mask at the appropriate time. And for me, it was just like, I'd categorize it as a work of existentialist literature to the extent that I was like, you're capturing what it feels like to be in the state of like doubleness, you know, which is just very particular to our generation.
Yeah, and that's what one of the the struggle uncle actually sort of like points out in terms of the double consciousness, and like, and that's actually like, you know, for the first time, I think you're the first person to say like it's a feeling, because I could never say like what this book is about. People are like, yo, what's your book about? I'm like, born FreeLoaders. You know. But yeah, it definitely is like this trying to capture like a moment, a mood, like a position, a space and time, you know, and how that was navigated back then.
So let's come on to form, because one of the interesting things you do here is like you separate the narrative out with some like allegories that just extend this theme of what it's this ambiguous position, you know, that's occupied. And I thought those allegories were quite something. Like the education one. Let's go with the knowledge one. So there's education, there's knowledge, but like you capture this feeling of being between worlds by like this allegory of like being between species. Just being like, so like on the knowledge, the generations had yielded results beyond ordinary marvel. The fish retained an eye for detail that children missed in their pious dedication to the land and equal exchange. Their service to memory was not synced to that of the fish. The children assumed that the fish were predisposed to an amiable observatory manner. So you're like, there's this whole allegory that runs through the book of like these fish that had to leave the water and go to land, and then there's some that are like in between land and water, some went to the water, some on the land, and it's a wonderful way to be like, this is the moment we're in right now. Like take us through the decision to like punctuate the text with this like separate allegory.
So I kind of stumbled on that one. I know this is gonna sound like a wank, but it was like that moment in like Stranger Than Fiction when Emma Thompson is like going through like crazy writer's block, and she's like trying to figure. She knows like where the ending is, but she doesn't know how to like get there. And then like the orange kind of drops, and then she's like, oh, okay, cool, there it is, like in the simplest form kind of thing. That's low-key what happened with this one, because I had this this idea, children without tongues, and then I just had it as the struggle uncle just being like, you know, like as a dismissive, you know. And then I was like, but there's something there that can like really sort of be played with. And I was like, and I also had this nagging idea of in Mohsin Hamid's The Reluctant Fundamentalist. There's a point where you know, the main character is being sort of chided about sort of separating from his Pakistani roots and going more American. And so the example that's used is the Janissary, which is the Ottoman Empire took Muslim children and then turned them into the president's bodyguards. So they were a lot more devoted to the Ottomans. So I was kind of like, okay, cool. So how, like, I really like that idea. How do I put it here? And so then I was like, okay, actually, let's look at the flux that South Africa is in, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, right now, land is obviously like the number one hot topic.
Sure.
And then also, you know, looking at the complexity of racial identity in South Africa, you know.
And how it evolves and shifts, which I think is nice because it's not static in the book.
Exactly. Because it's constantly, I mean, race is just simply like in the book, you know, it's political categories, really. And so yeah, and to a lesser degree, I also, like, it was also a kind of idea around how colonialism uses miscegenation as like a tool as well, you know. So like so it was just like lightly trying to touch and brush up on those like ideas.
Yeah. I have to go to the education one as well because, man, like, the children without tongues lived throughout the ages of humanity, stretching all the way back to the first people to leave the seas. In fact, they watched fish emerge from water and turn into tree-climbing monkeys. They had helped with this transformation in exchange for a promise that they in turn would be taught how to breathe underwater. You know, and then the allegory continues, and then the actual story continues from there. But yeah, it's sometimes just putting it in that stark way helps to like appreciate. I was like, I'm dealing with so much, and it becomes normal because people in this generation are dealing with so much.
Yeah.
But I suddenly started to think like the sheer psychological burdens of like culture. You have to understand Xhosa culture unimpeachably.
Yeah.
But you also have to speak English perfectly.
Yeah.
And you have to mediate those worlds perfectly together.
Yeah.
And then you have like an intimate relationship, and then you have to mediate the worlds of that relationship and the different worlds you occupy, and it's like we're dealing with this all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just like normal everyday life stuff, like one day after another.
Yeah, and that's also like why, like, I thought the children without tongues was also interesting, and why I separated it into education, knowledge, and wisdom. Because obviously we, as black people, through like westernized lenses, we're constantly in a state of flux of having to choose a knowledge system that we were operating in, so making the adjustment from the English to the Xhosa lens.
Sure.
And so, one, you've got to like learn all of this, but then two, you're expected to know all of it, you know? And, you know, with the wisdom, you're supposed to like be able to reflect on everything and be able to put it into like neat categories and boxes. And so for the children without tongues, I also was exploring the idea of, you know, pressure that you don't know is kind of there. So the idea of the children forgetting about, like, starting to lose their memories, and after the psychosis of memory, and being underwater, but not knowing that they're underwater, you know, and not understanding that there's the pressure of water that they are unaccustomed to, that they're sort of dealing with. You know?
Yeah. So let's come back to the main narrative as well, and some of the characters and the developments there.
Yeah. Can I just say, shout out Wimpy? Y'all have the greatest breakfast. I'm in love. I'm enamored, bro.
Hey man, like who knows?
Shout out Wimpy. That hash brown, that bacon, I love it.
Next thing, there could be a Wimpy proposal, like on social media vibes.
Right? Like, I mean, dude, then I would have done my job here.
No doubt. You'd be done.
Oh.
Yeah, like, I mean, we don't want to go through the whole book either, but like, choosing a fairly short narrative, but then going back into memories and then just showing the development of the various born freeloaders. I guess it could be interpreted in many ways who the born freeloaders are. Is it the people reading? Is it the people in the book? But how did you come about that strategy of like, okay, it's going to be a short story in terms of time, but then I'm going to go back and reflect on like all the experiences that come into these moments?
Yeah, so I've got a very weird relationship with writing time. I don't know if I can like protract, because for me, like, I mean, and when you're writing, I mean, you yourself are an author, like, you know that time is not linear, it's not chronological in any sense of the word, right? So, like, so for me, memory is very, very important to the construction of realities. So that's why I was like, okay, cool, this is actually going to take place over a weekend. And the reason why I wanted it to take place over that weekend was to concentrate the sort of awkward hedonism that these kids are trying to indulge, you know, and like illustrate a lot of what social interactions are, which is just limited purviews into someone's like life, you know, like when you interact with someone, you're like, ah, fuck, that dude's an awkward cat, and you don't know if it was just a bad day or dude's actually an awkward cat, you know. So like we've got these sort of constructions all the time, just like playing out in these projections that we put onto people. And so that's what I actually wanted to do, is just to have a bunch of projections walking past each other.
So one snapshot of that is one of the key characters, like thinking back to his experience at the mountain.
Yeah.
And once again, I was just like, I don't think this should be written about, because this is like exactly my experience, and I'm used to not having my experience in a book.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like take us through writing that moment, because this is a perfect reflection of this doubleness, right? On the one hand, we all know the critiques of Ulwaluko, like, you know, there's been important art recently showing the deficiencies of the culture, but at the same time, you're expected to understand, know the culture, go through it in some cases, and then you live in this world where you're like, I've been through this experience, I also understand the critique, and there are like 3 people in the world who also know that, you know, and who can have that conversation. So like take us through that memory and your decision to put that snapshot into the book.
Well, I think it's one of the... So I thought, one, I didn't want to exploit the idea of initiation school, because I think it can easily be made corny and just like sort of thrown around for whatever salacious effect, you know?
Yeah, for sure. At the same time, though, it's also like, if the people who haven't actually been through initiation school don't talk about it, then it also gets appropriated by like some German documentary filmmaker, you know?
Or in this case, a South African white guy using his dad's struggle credits. But anyway, so for me, it was important, and again, it's about the consciousness. It wasn't about, the spectacle of, hey, now he's crying about his chopped penis. You know what I mean? Like, it was, it was about like, okay, cool, he's coming into himself now. Like, he's like realizing he's coming into manhood, because there's also a lot of things he's being told, it's because, I mean, the book actually is a coming of age story. So he's literally coming of age in that moment and like learning the harsh truths and realities of life, So that's what I thought was the most important part about learning and journeying into adulthood. And in the different ways that we experience it, because I mean, yeah, we get told, yeah, you're 18, you're a man now, like whatever. That's just school. That's the school lens, And then, like on the other side is like instead of going to matric rage, motherfucker, you're going you're gonna be in there for like the next month,
right.
you know.
And then you have to come out of there and try and explain
exactly
to yourself and others.
You literally leave school to go to school and then basically go back to school, like with varsity, you know. Like, so it's kind of like, you know, like when does the learning stop? You know. So,
well, look, I hope you'll all pick up a copy of Born Freeloaders. It is an excellent piece of work, and it's, once again, I say, jolting to actually see so much of the experience that we go through presented in a literary form. And I think it's a really important intervention. So, bro, thanks so much for joining us on SMWX, and all the best with the book.
Thank you so much, my G. Shout out Wimpy, shout out Dali Tambo, and Tandem Bike.
Ayeye. Thanks for watching the content. Like, share, and subscribe on all platforms. smwx.co.za to join the WhatsApp channel. And let's build a new conversation for a new generation. Ayeye.